So John Hickenlooper was one of the numerous centrists that we had at the debate, and, his inclusion was absolutely unnecessary because he is less aggressive than the other centrists, and he desperately tried to represent that wing of the party, but he just fumbled, he babbled, and it was really embarrassing. And John Hickenlooper, to me, he just came off as, for lack of a better word, a cuck. And I will rarely use that word unironically because I think only stupid people use that word. But I don't know what else to use to describe John Delaney because that's just what I get when I hear him talk. He just doesn't make sense half the time. He's rambling and, I don't understand why he thinks he has a chance. He was booed by Democrats at the KDAM's convention. He only reached 2% maximum and was just excited about that. So maybe he feels like he's getting his second win, but it's not going to happen. Nonetheless, let me give you an example here because he attacked Bernie Sanders here and why, Bernie Sanders shouldn't be the nominee because he's not as electable as him. Try to figure out what he's trying to say here, what point he's trying to make, because all I hear is just nonsense from John Hickenlooper.
Are you saying that Senator Sanders is too extreme to beat President Trump?
I'm saying the policies of this notion that you're going to take private insurance away from 180 million Americans who many of them don't want to give it. Many of them do want to get rid of it, but some don't. Many don't. Or you're going to, the Green New Deal, make sure that every American is guaranteed a government job if they want. That is a disaster at the ballot box. You might as well FedEx the election to Donald Trump. I think we've got to focus on where Donald Trump is failing. The word malpractice, and this is interesting. I always thought it was doctors or lawyers. It's, negligent, improper, illegal professional activity for doctors, lawyers, or public officials. Google it. Check it out. Donald Trump is malpractice personified. We've got to point that out. Why is it soybean farmers in Iowa need 10 good years to get back to where they were 2 years ago? Where's the small manufacturing jobs that are supposed to come back? Why are we lurching from one international crisis to another? All things that he promised American voters. We've got to focus on that and the economy and jobs and training so that we can promise a future for America that everybody wants to invest in.
Okay, so he used the same talking point that everyone else is suddenly using, who's either a Republican, a media pundit, or a health industry insider. He says that Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All plan would quote-unquote take healthcare away from people. You're being incredibly dishonest, you're a liar, and we know exactly what you're doing. You have an agenda, and we see right through you. And, he's saying, if there's a far leftist as the nominee, we might as well FedEx the election to Donald Trump. But then he makes a case as to why he's more electable than someone like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, and he bases his electability argument on a word: malpractice. Google it. No, really, you should Google it. And he says Donald Trump is malpractice personified. So that is supposedly going to get Donald Trump. Look, you can talk about how ideologically speaking you believe that a centrist is more equipped to take on Donald Trump. I would disagree with you because we tried that 2 years ago or 3 years ago and it didn't work. But nonetheless, if you're honestly making the case that you're better equipped to take on Donald Trump because you're going to use words like malpractice against him, you're going to get your ass handed to you, John Delaney. You're going to be destroyed. And you've been destroyed at 2 debates thus far, and I don't think your odds would be any better against Donald Trump, who is a belligerent buffoon, and even though he doesn't make any coherent points ever, he's going to talk over you and make you look like the beta male cuck that you are. So him and Bernie kind of sparred at one moment, and you can just tell Bernie was irritated because at this point, really at all points throughout the debate, John Hickenlooper was just babbling. He wasn't saying anything meaningful. And really, I was just waiting on them to cut his mic and shut him up. But watch what happens when Bernie Sanders started to visibly, express how irritated he was with John Hickenlooper's nonsense.
I think if we're going to force Americans to make these radical changes, they're not going to go along. You throw your hands up, but you haven't. Oh, I can do it. but you haven't implemented the plans. Us governors and mayors are the ones that we have to pick up all the pieces when suddenly the government's supposed to take over all these responsibilities and there's no preparation, the details aren't worked. You can't just spring a plan on the world and expect it to succeed.
Senator Sanders.
John, I was a mayor, and I helped transform my city. I have some practical experience. Second of all, interestingly enough, today is the anniversary of Medicare. 54 years ago, under Lyndon Johnson and the Democratic Congress, they started a new program. After 1 year, 19 million elderly people in it. Please don't tell me that in a 4-year period, we cannot go from 65 down to 55 to 45 to 35. This is not radical. This is what virtually every other country on earth does. We are.
Thank you, Senator.
I want to bring out.
Bernie Sanders has got no time for John Hickenlooper's stupidity. And the point that John Hickenlooper made to own Bernie Sanders, if you will, debunked in a second. He says, you haven't implemented plans. Us governors, us mayors, we're the ones who are doing all of these things. We're the ones with executive experience. And what did Bernie Sanders say? I was a mayor. John, you are an embarrassment. You're a poor debater. You would absolutely get crushed against Donald Trump. You know, I would go on to argue that you'd probably do worse than Hillary Clinton against Donald Trump. You're that bad. You are that bad. So I don't know why he's still here. And Bernie Sanders said, look, this is not radical when it comes to Medicare for all. This is what every other major country on earth does. We are the odd men out. And as he, continues to make this case, the indefensible position is coming from people who say we shouldn't do Medicare for all. You've lost this argument. Progressives have monopolized the discussion when it comes to healthcare. And so your position is now untenable. And if you are going to attack Medicare for all, you've got to do better than just regurgitating the same talking points over and over and over. Oh, well, millions of people will have their private insurance taken away, the transition period, yada, 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 chaos. You've got to do better because the Democratic Party base wants Medicare for all, and now a majority of Americans want Medicare for all. So if you think that you can use the same tired, rehashed talking points that we've been hearing for years now and do it with the level of charisma that John Hickenlooper has, I just don't know what you expect to happen. I honestly don't know why he hasn't dropped out, and I get that I'm getting a little bit repetitive because I've said this about a lot of centrists, but it's time for the field to start thinning, right? There's 20 people running, more than 20 people running. We don't need this many candidates. If you're a centrist, you've got a plethora of options. Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, Joe Biden. We don't need John Hickenlooper and John Delaney and Tim Ryan and Steve Bullock. We don't need you. It's time to drop out, do everyone a favor, drop out, and stop being a narcissist, because if you haven't taken the hint yet that, the Democratic Party base is just not that into you, then I don't know when you're going to get it. We don't like you, John. Drop out and take John Delaney with you. We don't like him either. Take all your centrist friends with you.
You could support the Humanist Report at patreon.com/Humanist Report. But trust me, I'd have way more supporters on Patreon if that was my podcast. Sad.